I'm Jodie Copley. I'm a Senior Lecturer and Clinical Education Program Director at the University of Queensland, and I also have a clinical education role in our clinics here. Scaffolding students' learning across the placement is something that I think really makes a difference to their experience, to how stressful the experience is, or how how they see themselves progressing, whether they feel that they have progressed in the way that is expected of them, or whether they feel that they are missing something or not quite coming up to the mark. Often it's the scaffolding of the learning that will help them to sort of feel like they're on that upward trajectory across the placement, rather than making missteps or not really realising, what was expected of them along the way. So it's useful for educators to be clear about how the placement will be scaffolded. Sometimes you need to make decisions about that along the way, of course, because we don't have complete control of our client group, and we can't always say, oh, you can have the simple cases or concerns first, and then we'll progress you up to more complexity with the clients you're seeing, because in many ways all the people we see and all the service users in our environment are complex in some way, because we're individualising what we do for them. So students need to be able to deal with that at some level. The scaffolding, I think, comes in what their role is in their contact with clients or service users, and what they're responsible for across the placement. So often we will have a situation where we give them opportunities for observation in the first days or first week of their placement, and then they get a little bit more responsibility, or they run part of a session, or they're responsible for part of it, and they work up to more independence and more full responsibility for their caseload. To make that meaningful, it's useful in the early stages to really structure in some ways what they're observing and how they're observing it, and tell them what you want them to notice. So you can do that, with a checklist or a table or something like that. We've often used that, where we've said, okay, first off, in this session, what I want you to notice is how I'm interacting with the person, what kinds of things I'm saying in answer to their information, what are the questions I ask, and then the next time it might be something else that you're asking them to look at. But giving them something very clear and concrete to focus on then gives you that fodder for discussion afterwards, because there's so much going on when a therapist is with a client or a group or whatever, and students will not initially notice all of that. And I think we sometimes forget that we're constantly zooming in and zooming out when we're observing things. We're so used to looking, as educators, to looking at the big picture and then zooming into the detail and out again, that we forget that that's such a skill that has to be built over time. So helping students to focus on one part of the picture and then gradually build that up is often quite useful to them. I also find that if we only give students the opportunity to observe us and see what we're doing and then model from that at the beginning, if we only give that opportunity first up, it misses the opportunity to scaffold their learning further as the placement progresses, because you don't really, as an educator, want the student to learn and learn and learn and then coast for the rest of the placement. You want it to be an ongoing trajectory. So to do that, I often find that at some point further on into the placement, I give them opportunities to observe me or other clinicians again, because they'll notice different things. They'll pick up on more complexities and more details, and they'll have more insight into why the therapist is doing what they're doing and what they're choosing to do with their interaction or their behaviour, or what they're doing with intervention from moment to moment. So that really helps to continue the students' learning over time. The role that students play early on in the placement, when you're giving them opportunities to observe and to see how you do things in the workplace, can vary. What they do in those situations can vary. I find it useful to understand their learning style a little bit and how they feel they work best from the beginning. So some students will want to sit and observe and have a structure as to what they're observing and what you're pointing them to and so forth. Others will want to learn by doing a little bit more and be a bit more actively involved. And I find it useful to give them that choice to begin with, because the ones that aren't more sort of, doing type learners will be a little bit, unnerved by having to do that early on. But the ones who are like that will often get more out of the situation, even if they don't fully understand what it is they're doing and why from the beginning. They engage with it more. They engage with what they're seeing and doing, and it raises questions for them and points for discussion more readily. Others like to watch, have some things to notice, talk to you about it, feel like they're prepared, and then have a more active role. So if you can vary that and let the students have some input into that, that often sort of helps their experience as well and helps their confidence as you go. Later on in the placement, if you're wanting to continue to scaffold their learning and hone their skills more and keep them on that upward trajectory rather than sort of, leveling off in their learning, I find that you can use modelling with them in a more specific way. So whereas initially you might be asking them to notice what you're doing and then try it in the next session, if you have the opportunity to work beside them a little bit, even if it's in the middle of the placement or 3/4 of the way through the placement, and you can, be part of what they're doing and then workshop that with them afterwards and say, now, when you said that, how do you think that was interpreted? How do you think that went? What did I say? What did you notice I said then? How did I say it? Was it different to how you said it? How was it different? Why do you think that got a different response? So that you're kind of unpacking for the student. It's a little bit of compare and contrast. And you can do that at any point in the placement, but I find that once they've got a little bit of confidence, they get a lot out of that. And it helps to break down for them what you want them to do next. Because it's easy for us to say, yeah, well, I'd like to see you, going to the next level with your client interaction, or going to the next level with your, evaluation afterwards, or whatever it might be. But unless you actually demonstrate that to them in graphic detail sometimes, so they can see it and compare it and contrast it with you, they might not know what it actually is you want them to do to respond to that request that you've given them, or to respond to that feedback.